I underlined a sentence in pencil because the library copy asked me to. The next morning, the river kept the exact promise I wrote in the margin. Since then, I returned books like weather, and I carry a soft cedar pencil the way some people carry luck. Entry 1, Monday, late afternoon, Ashford Street Public Library. After work at Whitmore and Company, I walk the long block to the Ashford Street Public Library, which never forgets my footsteps. The lamps are brass and patient. The circulation desk breathes a quiet rhythm of date stamps, soft thumps that feel like someone tidying the day. A sign says, "Please do not write in the books," which I respect in public and discuss only with shelves. Anna Whitmore volunteers on Mondays. She wears round glasses, ink on 2 fingers, and a smile that understands people who return books before conversations. I chose a worn anthology called City Weather, the copy with a rip near page 17 that the tape has decided to honor. A pencil line already lived there, faint and polite. In the margin, a note read, "In the careful hand of a person who belongs to librarians. If you fold the corner, the morning will arrive folded to match." It felt like a joke that had learned to be useful. I read a poem about the river taking attendance and folded the corner anyway. I did it gently, as if the page might be shy of angles. At Willowbrook Café, Tom Aldridge served tea without sugar because we have an understanding. "You look like you have adopted a rule," he said. "I folded a corner," I said. "Paper respects decisions," he said. "So do clocks," when asked nicely. I slept with the window cracked. The morning arrived with a bend in its edge. Sun splashed across the floor in a neat triangle that matched the page. I went back to the library and pretended the tape had not already expected me. Entry 2, Tuesday, between shelves. Anna stamped a neat line of returns, each stamp a small approval. David Blackwood fixed a humming vent with a screwdriver that whistled. The library was a ship with quiet decks, and everyone on board knew which rope to pull. I returned City Weather and found another book on the same shelf, a novel with the sort of dust that knows patience by name. On page 1, a margin note said, "Underline only verbs." On page 2, "The verbs will show you where the day intends to go." On page 3, a small arrow pointed to the word open. I underlined open. The pencil left a gray pulse like a good idea. At Willowbrook, the door swung wide while my hand was still a polite distance away. A man with a paper map stepped aside just in time, his apology already formed and unneeded. The river path opened around a group of tourists who moved like a school of fish that had just learned traffic. The elevator at Cedar Lane Apartments opened the second I thought of groceries. Verbs, apparently, do not wait to be thanked. That night, I wrote in this diary with the pencil balanced behind my ear. The graphite smelled like a tin lunchbox, like the first week of school when the world gives you paper and tells you to be kind with it. Entry 3, Wednesday, after rain. The library smelled of wet coats and confidence. A small sign had appeared by the reading tables, "Pencil only, please." I borrowed a pencil anyway because the cup felt happier when it had work. In an essay collection, I found a page with 3 notes stacked like steps. The first said, "Circle a name. You will meet a kindness by that name tomorrow." The second said, "Do not circle your own." The third added, "If you do, be prepared to accept help without correcting it." I circled Elena. I did not know an Elena except as a name that tastes like flour. On 5 at Cedar Lane, Elena Whitmore opened her door before my knuckles found the wood. "Can you carry this mixing bowl?" she asked. "It is heavier than the recipe expected." The bowl was a moon of batter, cinnamon, and cream. "Thank you," she said. "I will bring buns to Tom. He underlines good weather on the chalkboard." I laughed and felt the day adjust its coat. The margin rules were not tricks. They were manners practiced in pencil. The bell at the desk thumped a rhythm like a slow heart. Anna looked up and smiled, then pointed discreetly at a laminated card near the sign-out book. It read marginalia etiquette. Write in the book only if the book has already written to you. Entry 4, Thursday, early evening. There are shelves on the second floor that do not exist on maps. They are taller than they appear and closer than the eye admits. If you walk too fast, they turn your stride into a whisper. I found a thin volume titled Courtesy in Transit, the same book I once saw in Northwick. The Ashford copy had different notes. A faint line ran down the margin like a rail, and a sentence beside it said, "Draw a tiny arrow at the corner of your day. Someone will arrive exactly when waiting is kind." I drew an arrow in my diary, just a little chevron to the right. On the tram, the bell chimed twice, and then once more as if to signal an arrival that would be better if it came laughing. Tom boarded, carrying a bag that had decided to be warm. "Buns for the conductor," he said. I underlined generous this morning. Did it work? "The bus driver waited while a woman ran," he said. Everybody cheered inside their coats. At home, my door opened on the first try. I underlined the verb and left the arrow in place. In the morning, I found a post-it note tucked under my doormat. In pencil, a stranger had written, "Your arrow helped me ring at the right moment. Thank you for the timing." The handwriting was tidy. The gratitude belonged to a person who respects margins. Entry 5, Friday, the return slot. The return slot breathes on Fridays. People bring the week back in chapters. The bin accepts their edits and thumps conclusions with a soft sound that tells you the story is ready to be shelved. I fed city weather into the slot and felt a tiny resistance, like a hand checking the weight. The bin settled. The date stamp sang its small song. Anna wrote a note on a scrap, then tore it carefully and tucked the larger half into a novel. "It is not advice," she said. "It is a permission slip." In a travel guide printed 20 years ago, a reader had scrawled, "Do not be brave. Be polite. The city prefers it." I copied the line into my notebook because the pencil asked me to. On the walk to Willowbrook, the crosswalk changed with a courtesy that made cars look well-raised. Tom tapped the chalkboard and wrote soup, then beside it yesterday's soup. He underlined both and added a small arrow that pointed to a time that is not printed on any clock. "People like to see that the past has a menu," he said. That night a new note appeared under my door. "Please circle Marina tomorrow," it said in a different hand. "She will need an errand carried as quietly as possible." I slept with the pencil behind my ear like a promise. Entry 6, Saturday, late morning, Willowbrook and the pharmacy. I circled Marina while the kettle argued with itself. At the pharmacy on Ashford Street, Marina Holloway was directing a small choir of bottles toward a rightful order. "Could you take this to Cedar Lane 5? She asked, sliding a paper bag across the counter. "It is only tea and advice, but it benefits from arrival." The label read Elena W. and something about cinnamon and patience. "You are timely," Marina said. "I saw your circle on page 19 and wrote myself an excuse." Elena accepted the bag like a treaty. "I wrote thank you in the margin of a cookbook," she said. "It is a borrowed copy, and the rule is penciled in, so it should be allowed." We drank tea without sugar in her small kitchen that knows how to hold warmth without bragging. I left with a spare cinnamon bun that felt like a folded corner in a soft day. At the library, I found a new book waiting on the hold shelf without my name. The slip said Daniel M. in thin graphite someone had rubbed and retraced. Inside, on a flyleaf, very neat pencil. "If you erase a note, the day will offer you a choice to write again. Choose kindly." I tested the eraser on a tiny dot. The crumb curled and fell with the weight of a good idea. Entry 7, Sunday, rain again. Rain writes the city in cursive. The library windows fogged and cleared in polite cycles. I visited the shelf with atlases because maps enjoy advice. Someone had penciled a line along the river with the instruction, "Walk this tomorrow and notice 3 people who need the path to widen." The line curved near the bridge and past the tram stop and ended at Willowbrook where the door knows my shoulder. I traced the pencil with my fingertip. The graphite did not smudge. The plan had already learned to be steady. On the walk next day, I widened the path with small shifts and brief pauses. A mother with a stroller drifted past and nodded, apology already dismissed. A man carrying 2 coffees negotiated the bend without baptizing his sleeve. A boy balanced a paper boat on a puddle and grinned when the current adopted it. I underlined open again in the novel because verbs deserve company. That night, I dreamed I was a notebook, and the city wrote me in the margins with small, careful letters. The dream woke me like a date stamp, soft thump against the morning. Entry 8, before dawn, without a date. We will call this entry the hour when the library is a lake of wooden tables under a moon of lamps. I could not sleep, so I walked to the reading room. David let me in because Cedar Lane tenants keep odd hours, and he admires respectable habits. I sat near the window and opened a book of essays that smell like well-kept drawers. In the margin of an essay on courtesy, someone had written, "If you lend your voice to a stranger, The city will make room for your next sentence. A man rehearsed a phone call by the returns bin, whispering the kind of sincerity that has folded itself to fit. I stood near the desk and said, "You are doing well," without adding a story about times I did not. He nodded without turning, then placed the phone down and breathed out like a train putting on brakes for a friend. On the way home, I drew a small arrow in chalk on the sidewalk, pointing toward the library. 3 dots beneath it, because dots invite belief. In the morning, the arrow had been erased by shoes and weather, but the dots had learned to be popular. I found them on the chalkboard at Willowbrook and on the doorman's memo at Cedar Lane. They looked like a constellation that refuses to brag. Entry 9, Monday, the plan that is not mine. On the new fiction shelf, a novel wore a jacket like a coat at a church service. Inside, someone had sketched a small calendar without numbers and written under it, "For the next 3 days, carry pencils." Beside that, on the 4th day, carry an eraser. I obeyed because obedience felt like a reasonable experiment. The first day, a woman on the tram borrowed my pencil to annotate the timetable and returned it with a smile that stamped "returned on my morning." The second day, Tom used it to add a line to the chalkboard, "Today we make room." The third day, Anna wrote on a slip, "Please bring back city weather. It misses the shelf," and smiled when I produced it from my bag like a rabbit who knows it is still a rabbit. On the 4th day, I loaned the eraser to a boy who had written his name in capital letters he no longer admired. He rubbed lightly until the paper reopened to possibilities. "Better," he said. The margin rules were not magic so much as invitations with good manners. Still, they moved the day the way a discreet bell moves a tram. Entry 10, Tuesday evening, shelves like streets. The quiet between stacks is not empty. It is a street where books practice walking. I took a book that was not on my list and found the margin note that changed the center of this diary. It read, "If you write in the margin, you accept responsibility for what returns. If you write your own name, you agree to be kind to the version of you who reads it later." The words were in my hand. I had not written them. I had written them. The pencil felt heavier in my fingers, as if carrying a small train of carts. I turned the page and found another sentence in my hand. "Do not write clever. Write useful." I tested the second sound of the pencil, the small whisper that follows the line. It agreed with me or asked me to agree with it. I added one sentence, plain as bread. "If you see me tomorrow, remind me to breathe before arguing." The next day, Tom said, "Breathe before you argue," and I nearly laughed my tea into the saucer. "It was on the page," he said. "The book with the blue spine." Anna pretended not to hear. There are some discoveries that prefer to walk beside you rather than wave. Entry 11, Wednesday night, inversion. I had believed the margin notes came from a chorus of patient strangers. I had believed I was a reader blessed by a club. The inversion arrived between shelves when I opened Courtesy in Transit again and found a page that had been erased to the polite whisper of a former thought. In the soft ghost of pencil, 2 words, "My turn." The arrow that followed had my wrist in it. The next page was blank except for a small instruction in a clear hand. "Write what you can return without speeches." I wrote, "Leave a loaf at Cedar Lane 3. I wrote, "Tell David the vent hum is a kindness, not a flaw." I wrote, "Underline forgive but only once." The pencil did not complain. The air agreed. On Thursday morning, a basket sat by the elevator, bread under a towel. The vent hummed like a cat that has decided you are good company. I underlined forgive in a history of bridges, and later on the tram the conductor waited an extra beat for a man with a heavy bag. I started to say thank you and remembered to breathe first. The sentence worked better that way. Entry 12, Thursday evening, the ledger. There is a ledger near the desk, a notebook with a cardboard cover where people write their favorite first lines. The first line on the first page reads, "Please write gently." I added a line at the bottom of a crowded page. If your pencil breaks, it only means the sentence felt hope. Behind the desk, Anna kept a tin for broken leads. "We give them back to the pencil sharpener when it is in the mood," she said. "Some days it declines. We respect it." Tom came by with a thermos for the staff and a sign for the door that read "Weather is public property." He underlined property twice and added a tiny arrow that pointed not toward the rain, but toward the umbrella stand. The library makes more sense if you accept that arrows have hobbies. That night, under my door, a scrap. "You write like someone who has lost things kindly. Keep going. Use soft pressure. It was not signed, which felt like perfect grammar. Entry 13, Friday, the shelf that moves. Shelf 17 moved 2 inches overnight. David said it was the floorboards. Anna said it was the books making room for the atlas that refuses to be shelved facing in. I traced the dust line with a fingertip and found, in that faint trail, a tiny arrow like the one I draw in my diary. The arrow pointed to the returns bin. Inside lay a copy of City Weather with a new tier taped with care and a single note at the back. Do not try to own the rule. Let it borrow you. At Willowbrook, Tom had written on the board, today, return a chair. People laughed and did it. Some moved chairs an inch and called it a victory. Some offered a seat to a stranger and called it obvious. Some stood for a stop and called it morning. I circled Tom on a receipt, and the next day someone left a thank you card for him in the tip jar. The city understands a certain level of algebra. Circle a name, add a kindness, let the quotient be quiet. Entry 14, Saturday, the voice pencil. In a music theory book that had seen better ear training, I found a margin note that said, use a pencil on your voice today. Write softly. Erase nothing. I took it literally. I spoke less. I listened until the words in the room balanced like cups on a tray that refuses to spill. At the pharmacy, a man argued with the clock about closing, and Marina answered him in pencil voice. He calmed as if she had shaded his anger into a softer gradient and left with his medicine and a sentence he could carry. In the evening, Elena knocked with a test loaf. Too much cinnamon, she said. Please underline if you agree. We sampled and decided to underline once. Any more would be ungrateful. I wrote thank you in my diary and did not give the gratitude speeches. The pencil knew what I meant. Entry 15, Sunday, the letter without a stamp. I wrote a letter to my future self and left it in the reference section near the cards nobody uses because the computer pretends it loves you more. The pencil line looked steady. The words behaved. You are doing better when you remember to hold the door for words you disagree with, I wrote. Also, take a scarf. On Monday, the scarf hung by the lobby and seemed pleased to be included in a lesson. At the desk, Anna slid a small notebook across to me. For your marginalia, she said. Pencil only. If you run out of room, write smaller, not louder. David passed and fixed the pencil cup with a rubber band that had believed too long without evidence. Good as early, he said, which I decided was higher praise than good as new. Entry 16, Monday night, the quiet emergency. A power glitch turned one corner of the library dim. The desk lamp made a small pond of light. People drifted without anxiety. The shelves kept their balance. I found a slim book of ethics and a margin note that was simply an arrow toward the door with 3 dots. I walked to the door and held it. A woman entered with a stack of returns and relief. Thank you, she said. My hands were doing too much. The lights returned as if they had considered their options and chosen to be helpful. On my way out, I wrote in the ledger. If the room darkens, step toward where people meet. Hold that place open. The rest will remember how. The sentence felt like a chair being returned to where it belongs. Entry 17, Tuesday, the eraser day. The eraser day arrived without asking permission. I found a note in the atlas where the rivers run in deliberate curves. Erase a small cruelty you told yourself last week, it said. I erased the sentence about being laid in my bones. The crumb rolled like a tiny moon and fell harmlessly into the table's shadow. I breathed as if the breath had been waiting near the dictionary. The city felt less narrow for 3 blocks. At Willowbrook, Tom had written 1 cup for returning on the board and a price that made exact change an interesting challenge. People paid with coins and stories. Tom stamped received on the saucers with a rubber stamp he keeps for no reason beyond cheerfulness. The stamp looked like a date stamp's cousin. It made the same soft thump. Entry 18, Wednesday, the librarian dream. I dreamed I worked the desk, and the date stamp had my name on the handle. I stamped returns with my breath. Each thump agreed that someone had finished a chapter. When I woke, the sound followed me into the morning until it slowed to the rhythm of the street. The library is not a church and not a train station, but it worships order and it departs on time when it can. The day had a good spine, and the pages turned without complaint. On the end paper of a biography, I found a small line written in tidy pencil. Leave the book half a page open when you return it, so the next reader will feel invited. I did. The next afternoon, the book sat on a table, half open. A A stranger touched the edge of the page like someone testing water before stepping in. The invitation worked, and nobody applauded, which is how invitations prefer to succeed. Entry 19, Thursday, the second inversion. If I write in the margins and things happen, then someone wrote before me. If someone wrote before me, then someone may be writing after me. I found evidence in a mystery novel whose ending had already chosen kindness. In the margin, a pencil instructed the reader, "Do not accuse when you can ask." The next day, I almost accused a delivery driver of blocking the ramp. I asked instead. He moved the van with embarrassment and gratitude in equal amounts. The ramp glowed in the rain like a good idea. That evening, a new hand in the margins appeared, a little firmer, like a schoolteacher who did not have to raise her voice. "Slow your yes," it said. "Do not offer so quickly that you make the other person unskilled." I tried it at Willowbrook when Tom struggled with a stack of plates. I stood ready and did not swoop. He balanced, then laughed. "Thank you for letting me be useful," he said. The margin learned a new trick, generosity that does not steal practice. Entry 20, Friday, the long table. On Fridays, the big table by the window becomes a harbor. People dock with laptops and lists and a tendency to sigh in chord. The pencil notes in a book of essays suggested, sit at the big table, accept a request to watch someone's bag, return that favor later with a door held or a seat surrendered. I sat. A student asked me to watch his pile of notebooks. I did so with the solemnity the duty deserves. He returned with a tea and a cookie and placed the cookie near my elbow, as if it were a stamp I had earned. "For the watcher," he said. I accepted without speeches. The date stamp made its soft rhythm. The river kept its own ledger. The library grew one shade warmer by the measure of a cookie that belonged to both of us for a polite second. Entry 21, Saturday, the last advice for now. In a worn book of letters, I found a page where 5 different hands had written one line each. They did not argue. They harmonized. Underline gently. Circle names you can carry. Draw arrows only toward kindness. Erase without shame. Do not keep the pencil when you go. Leave it where someone will need it. I copied the lines into this diary because diaries enjoy company. On my walk home, Ashford Street let the wind carry a page of news against my ankle, which I returned to a bin with the discretion of a librarian who knows that not all paper becomes history. Elena waved from 5 with a loaf that had learned moderation. I raised the pencil like a flag and put it back in the cup by my door. Closing. If you find this diary out of order, blame the margins. They prefer to file by kindness rather than by date. If you write in the library books, do it only when the book writes first. If a sentence in pencil asks you for help, let it borrow you. If you draw 3 dots under an arrow, mean it. The date stamp will do the rest. Tag. Write gently, return better. Epilogue, soft, for future readers. I keep the pencil dull on purpose now. A sharp line can look like a command. A soft line looks like an offer. When I forget and press too hard, the paper complains with a shine that reflects the lamp rudely. Then I turn the pencil and erase until the complaint quiets. On certain days, I hear the eraser before it touches the page, a tiny felted hush like footsteps in socks. The hush says, try again. The hush says, this time, smaller. On Ashford Street, the tram bell rings twice for careful stops and once for brave ones. The library bell is a date stamp thump that approves without performance. Between them I keep my hours. If you add your line in the margin after mine, I will not know your name, which is a relief. Anonymous kindness treats everyone as a regular. If the river ever seems to read over your shoulder, let it. It edits with tide and does not gloat. If the wind lifts a page, secure it with your hand, and then with a doorstop. You will have invented a ritual. If a stranger circles your name in pencil, accept the errands that follow and return them in a different color of day. You do not need a blue pencil. Graphite understands every season. When the book in your lap asks for a folded corner, fold it like a promise you expect to keep, not like an ultimatum you might regret. If the page tears, tape it with moderation and let the tape show. The scar will teach someone to turn that page more carefully. The library likes scars that instruct. I have written smaller here than I do in my morning notes because this belongs to a shelf rather than to a single chair. If you are tempted to polish my sentences into speeches, remember the rule that lives at the desk. Do not write clever, write useful. Add to that, whispered in the pencil cup, do not write loud, right near. The person who needs the line will already be close. Entry 22, Monday, the pencil census. Anna placed a cup of newly sharpened pencils on the desk with the ceremony one reserves for candles. We do a pencil census once a month, she said. We count how many points the room can make. I laughed, and then realized she meant it kindly and exactly. People write better when they know there are more points than problems. I took one pencil from the cup and returned another that had done its week. On the flyleaf of a cookbook someone had penciled, "If the recipe fails, underline the line that forgave you for trying." I did, and later in my kitchen the soup admitted it had been a little proud of its salt. I added water and a story about first attempts that do not deserve endings. Entry 23, Monday night, the stairwell margin. Between the second and third floors the stairwell has a broad landing where the light studies people. A small chalk mark lived on the wall at the height of a thoughtful elbow, 3 dots, and a tiny arrow. Someone had drawn a rectangular box around it, like a librarian making a footnote. I stood there for a minute longer than I needed to, and 2 people passed, each gaining a polite breath because the stairs belonged to them for the moment. The city collects these seconds and does not brag. Back at the table, I found a book of letters between friends. In the margin, a hand that likes rulers had drawn a bracket around a paragraph and written, "This is the part that saves an afternoon." I read the paragraph twice. It said exactly what the chalk in the stairwell had suggested. Borrow less space than you can carry, return more. Entry 24, Tuesday, the small repair. David replaced a loose hinge on the quiet room door. The screw insisted on its history, then agreed to be present. Buildings keep their own diaries, David said. We try to make the entries short. He showed me a pencil he keeps in his pocket, the wood worn smooth by an honest job. I write on tape when a fix needs a sentence. The tape above the hinge read, in neat capitals, "Do not rush the latch." I obeyed. The latch thanked me with a sound like a soft yes. In a book about bridges, I found a pencil sketch of a hand holding a cup of tea. Below it, "Drink this before answering the question that makes you famous to no one." I copied the hand badly and the sentence well. When Tom asked later whether today's soup could be called yesterday's soup if it had improved overnight, I sipped and said, "It can be called today's patience." He underlined patience on the chalkboard and drew a small arrow toward the ladle. Entry 25, Wednesday, the shelf of unnumbered spines. There is a shelf with a habit of refusing labels. The books live without call numbers for 2 days at a time, as if practicing democracy. On that shelf, I found a thin memoir with margins so spacious they had their own weather. A penciled instruction said, "Write a 1-sentence map for a person who will take your seat." I wrote, "If the lamp flickers, twist the knob a little and consider it a request to stay." I left the seat warm and the lamp obedient. Later, at Cedar Lane, the elevator stopped between floors for a breath that tasted like caution. Nobody panicked. We breathed as if practicing for a library. When the doors opened, a stranger said, "After you." And I heard the sentence in a margin somewhere applaud. Entry 26, Thursday, the borrowed hand. My hand ached from writing. The pencil suggested rest by being shorter than enthusiasm. In a poetry collection, I found a note, "Borrow a hand by copying a line aloud." I read 2 lines quietly to the room and felt, inexplicably, assisted. Perhaps the room lends a hand if you speak to it gently. The next page asked me to underline the word neighbor wherever it appeared. I did, and then discovered that every door I pushed that day felt lighter, as if doors like to be called by generous names. Marina taped a sign near the pharmacy bell, "Please ring twice, then wait." Below it, in pencil, someone added, "Thank you for letting us arrive." The bell rang less like impatience and more like punctuation. I bought tea without sugar and circled "thank you" on the receipt before handing it back to the day. Entry 27, Friday, the almost argument. Tom and a customer debated the ethical status of yesterday's soup. The voices rose, then paused in the exact way a pencil hovers before committing to a line. I remembered the margin that urged "slow your yes" and said, "May I offer a sentence?" They nodded. "You are both right. The soup is yesterday's practice and today's service." The tension dissolved like salt into a better broth. The customer laughed, left a tip in coins and compliments, and drew a tiny clover in the steam with his finger. Back at the library, a child asked me if the pencils belonged to everyone. I said they did. He nodded gravely, and wrote his name on the paper provided. Then he erased it perfectly and smiled at the clean space. I wanted to see if the page would forgive me, he said. It did. Entry 28, Saturday, the notice board. The notice board near the entrance usually advertises piano lessons, a lost mitten, a set of keys that grew bored, and the community garden schedule for tomatoes that refused to be punctual. Today a new card appeared, Marginalia Circle, first Saturday, pencil provided. The card had no phone number, only 3 dots and a small arrow. I attended. We were 5 people and a cup of pencils. Anna sat with us and did not lead. We read a paragraph aloud and, in our own books, wrote one gentle instruction for tomorrow. Mine? Carry a seat in your patience. On the way home I tried it. I did not sit. I carried the idea of sitting for those who needed it more. 2 stops later, I offered my actual chair to a man whose day had dented his spine. He accepted without excuses. I stood with my patience and found that it had legs. Entry 29, Sunday, the envelope. Under my door an envelope with no return address. Only a drawn pencil on the flap. Inside, one line in soft graphite. You have been writing in the margins for a while now. Please remember to write in the middle sometimes. I took that to Willowbrook and ordered breakfast without my usual debate about names for eggs. In the afternoon I called my sister and used full sentences, verbs and all. The day stood closer to the center and did not wobble. At the library I wrote in the ledger, middle of the page, the place where a person can see themselves without tilting the lamp. Anna read the line and placed beside it a tiny adhesive star that did not blind anybody. Entry 30, late Sunday, the soft stop. On the tram a chime rang twice, then once, then held a silence that felt like a librarian putting a finger to her lips. The driver apologized for the pause. The car approved of honesty with a mood like warm wood. I thought of the margin note about lending your voice and said, "We are fine," and the car believed me. At Ashford Street, I stepped off into air that had been reading over someone's shoulder. Back home, I drew 3 dots on the inside of my doorframe at eye level. They are small. They ask nothing. Yet when I see them, I step into the hallway softer. The margins are not outside the text. The building has learned to annotate me back. Coda. Tomorrow I will return the pencil I am using now and take a duller one from the cup. I will write smaller when the page is crowded, and I will leave room at the edges for whoever needs a place to rest their line. If a stranger underlines breathe in a book I have not yet opened, I hope I hear it at the right moment and accept it without speeches. The date stamp will make it small thunder. The river will edit the afternoon. If you arrive after me, draw an arrow only if you are willing to follow it. If you cannot follow, draw 3 dots and trust the room.